and then I'll hand over to Donna, who's going to talk more about the quarter and some of the changes that we implemented here at Leicester. So hopefully you'll find it an informative session and learn from the experience that we've had here. So not moving. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Just thought I'd start initially with a couple of slides to show the. So back in May 2020, this is the headline from the HSJ. So this is when it first came to light, I guess, that there was an issue over financial misreporting within the trust. At that point, it was sort of 46 million. NHS England at that point commissioned an investigation into the financial reporting of the trust. And then again, even some time after that, back in September 2021, so over a year after that initial issue, there was further headlines about the fact that we'd further delayed the publication of our 1920 accounts because effectively we'd had to restate. But again, it hit the headlines that there was, as in these words, unprecedented financial failure trust delays the accounts again. So they were some of the headlines that we were facing at that time. So I thought it'd be useful just initially to give a bit of a timeline. So a lot of this revolved around the 1920 accounts. So we actually we had an audit report in November 20, which in itself was later than it would normally be for a normal trust. And I actually started in the trust in January 21. So I came into a situation where we'd had a very adverse audit findings report from our auditors related to 1920. And we then effectively had to restate our annual accounts for 1920. And if you look at those dates, we actually got a final auditor's report in March 22. So by that point, we were 20 months behind the curve, if you like. The national deadline should have been June 20, but it took best part of 15 months after I came in to restate those 1920 accounts. And then you can see thereafter we were playing a catch-up process. So 2021 accounts weren't submitted from an auditor point of view till August 22. We caught up a bit, so we're 14 months behind. Then in 21-22, they were submitted in April 23. We were gradually catching up, so we're 10 months behind, right through to the 22-23 when we submitted in August 23, which again was 2 months behind. So it's only in 23-24 when we submitted them in line with the national timetable that we'd actually finally caught up. So, after that first 15 months, there was a real acceleration. But literally, after that, we did 4 sets of accounts in just over 2 years. So that just gives you a sense of the magnitude of how far back we were and how far we've had to catch up. Just trying to sticky. I won't go on to the next slide. I'll just go back. Yeah, sorry about that. This again, just in graphical form, this is actually from our auditors. Actually, it shows the journey that we followed. So going way back to March 20, we started with we had no opinion, I'll be honest, in the first instance when the accounts were first drafted, and then we ended up with something called a disclaimer opinion, which basically means the auditors couldn't give an opinion really on the accounts because there was deemed to be so many material errors in them, and that was even after all the work we'd done. But there was recognition that improvements had been made, and you can see this gradual upward curve since then. So the level of weaknesses have actually reduced over time through the work that we've put in. So we moved from in 1920 from a disclaimer opinion into the 21 financial year into an adverse opinion. It was only March for the March 22 accounts that we eventually got to a qualified opinion, which was actually maintained for the next year because we had to reduce some of the qualifying areas. And then finally in the 23-24 financial year, we managed to get a clean audit opinion for the first time. So it was effectively a 2 to 3 year burn, given the magnitude of the issues that we've got. So I'm still struggling with the slides. Let me just look. Might be easier to do it this way because it's not moving in the slideshow. So yeah, that just summarizes where we're. So first draft, we had a draft disclaimer opinion. We ended up with a disclaimer opinion even after 15 months work, but it was a much improved sort of presentation. Must admit, I'd never even heard of a disclaimer opinion before I came to Leicester, so it was a bit of a shock to me. Then modified adverse opinions. So even at that point, we'd still got 11 qualifying areas of the accounts. And then we made some big strides particularly in 21-22 and 22-23 to get it down to 2 qualifications. And then finally the unqualified opinion in 23-24. This slide just gives a bit of a sense of some of the issues that we've got. I've never ever had an audit findings report, or sometimes called an IS 260 report. It's actually 133 pages long, which is significantly more than you would expect. And the overriding opinion was that we considered that material misstatements exist in the financial statements, and the effects of the misstatements are pervasive. A disclaimer opinion is issued where the possible effects of undetected misstatements could be material. And then this slide just gives you a sense of some of the material areas that the auditors identified was still preventing them from giving a better than that opinion. So there was a whole issue around management override controls, particularly lack of control over journal authorization and details on those journals. So it made it quite difficult for the auditor to work out what those journals were trying to do. There was incomplete control accounts, prior year comparisons have been misstated. Then there's a whole raft around expenditure completeness or lack of completeness, ranging from VAT misstatement, payroll misstatement, poor year-end recording of inventories. We've got a large medical equipment services contract, a finance lease that was misreported, misreporting of payables, GR&I agreement balances, deferred income, the whole raft really, in terms of there was issues with all areas really. Improper patient care, income, revenue recognition, and then completeness of inventory. There's also issues with the valuation of land and property, again, another huge area of the balance sheet, that it wasn't tied into our estate strategy. Gross internal areas have been used for the valuation that were out of sync with that, there was issues with the asset lives, additions and depreciation. So, literally every aspect of the accounts needed looking at, and hence that's why we had to do the restatement. So that's really what I came into when I came into the trust. So we then restated basically, and that was the 15-month period. So eventually we got them signed off on March 22, albeit with again a disclaimer opinion, but progress was achieved. And it's worth noting the auditors did note that we considered the work undertaken by the trust during 2021 to resolve matters and restate that the financial statements has been supported the trust to improve its control environment in financial and year-end financial reporting. The accounts represent a more accurate view of the trust finances. However, despite these matters these matters have significantly impacted on the conclusions we have been able to reach and have resulted in providing a disclaimer audit opinion. So it was a little bit demoralizing still to have a disclaimer opinion, despite the fact that things had actually improved. To even get to that point, our work was being supported by Deloitte, who were excellent partners in helping us to do that. And we also had the NHSI intensive support team working alongside us as well to make sure we got the accounts into a better place. So it was a tough message to take, but I think underlying that there was a recognition that things had significantly improved in those first 15 months. They were probably the toughest 15 months since I've been here, just to get us even to that point. But as you can see here, the actual AFR was still quite big. It was still It's 117 pages, a bit less than before, but it obviously was indicating there's still some material errors in the accounts that needed to be looked at. So then we came to 2021. I think the thing worth noting here is that these were almost being done at the same time as the 1920 restatement, so it was actually quite difficult to make a big stride in terms of the improvement of the audit opinion, because some of the errors that were pervasive in presenting the 1920 hadn't actually been corrected in time to just for the 2021, because we're almost doing them in parallel, which made life quite difficult. That said, we did receive an improved opinion, albeit a modified adverse opinion. And the comment from the auditors was that the accounts presented for audit were improved on the prior year accounts, and we note the improvement in some controls. However, again, still some material or pervasive weaknesses, as the auditors identified, that prevented that being better. But as I've said before, that there was a reduced number of qualifications down to 11. Sorry, there was 11 areas of weakness, and there was 29 recommendations, which was significantly less than what we had in the 1920 accounts. And I've just made the point here that actually, because they're almost being prepared at the same time, the restatement as well as the 2021, that's why it was probably not as big an improvement as you would probably have expected. Now, at that point, we developed a financial improvement plan, and that actually included 174 actions, of which the 29 were the external audit, internal audit actions. But we got recommendations from NHSI in terms of the grip and control checklist. We also had recommendations from Deloitte, the work they'd done, as well as internal audit. So we put all of that together as one big improvement plan, which, if we actually managed to address all of those actions, we would then be in a much better place. So we then got to 21, 22. We had a new set of auditors by this point, and a much improved position. So I've never been so grateful to get a qualified opinion. I've never had a qualified opinion, but actually to get to a qualified opinion was a real improvement. And we actually, we submitted the draft 21, 22 accounts actually to the timetable, but obviously because of the delays in catching up, we were still behind the submission of the qualified accounts, if you like, or audited accounts, shall I say. So that audit process didn't really start till December 22, 23. But what that did do is it bought us a few more months to make sure everything was in the right place in terms of the quality of the working papers and that sort of thing. So we actually, during the course of that year, managed to reduce the number of qualifications down to 2, as I said earlier, and actually only 9 new external audit final accounts actions. So a much more improved position. You can see the comment from the auditors there. That Grant Thornton, or our previous auditors, issued an adverse opinion in 2021 and a disclaimer opinion in 20. Therefore, we moved to a qualified opinion, which reflects the progress the trust has made in strengthening its governance processes in relation to its preparation of its financial statements. So the journey is not yet complete, but we do recognise a significant amount of work has been done and is planned to reach the ultimate goal of a return to a clean audit opinion in the future. So that was almost the signpost to what was going to happen in for the next couple of years. So it was a real important thing to reach. And just going back, you can see the pages of the report are actually reduced. It almost halved from the 117 pages we had before. We were down to 54. So that in itself was an indication of the fact things were improving, really. So we've almost got back to a bit of normality now. So 22, 23, we still weren't quite able to get to an unqualified opinion, mainly because of two issues. One, there was still a flow through from the previous year of opening balances, which still qualified, which meant they still had to be qualified into this financial year as well. And there was one area that we were still working on, which was asset verification, which is the physical testing that assets physically exist and those that are reported in the account. So that's probably one of the areas that up until this point we hadn't been able to tackle because there were so many other issues to tackle. But obviously at this point we'd obviously started to tackle it, but it still wasn't at quite the place where we could be given an unqualified opinion on that aspect. And then eventually we got to 23-24, the year which is just gone, and we did manage to secure that, and that was a momentous position to get to. First time in 5 years we got an unqualified opinion. We were able to demonstrate that we've got good, really good controls now over the existence of equipment testing. We delivered the timetable both for draft and national, so it was all consolidated, and there was no new 23-24 audit action. So it has been a real journey over that period. So hope that gives you a flavour. I think this slide's more as much about just some of the things I experienced myself. So I think the biggest challenge I found was managing in a team of substantive staff and interims. We've probably got to bear in mind that staff have been quite burnt by this over the previous year. When I came in, it'd been quite a difficult period for staff. So it was a case of working not just with them, but the interims we'd brought in almost to plug some of the gaps we've got in the structure, as well as working with NHSI and Deloitte. So there was a lot of stakeholders involved in trying to get us over the line. So it was all about compassionate leadership, really. And one thing I would say is that when I came into trust, everybody was really willing to do things better. There was no resistance, and all the staff that were there were really, really supportive of the change that was required. It did require that sort of compassionate leadership to recognise what they've been through and actually then work with them to help improve things. And that was a big challenge, really. Got to remember we did this during a period of massive workforce change, which Donna may talk about. So there's a recognition that the structure in the department wasn't fit for purpose. So as well as delivering all this, we also, we restructured everything within the finance departments. So that involved people leaving, new people coming in. So again, a lot of turbulence, and it was quite difficult to get that stability and still get us to deliver what we needed to do. And that leads on to the next point, really. It's all about operationally just keeping the day-to-day on the road. A lot of the focus is on the restatement work, but equally we had to make sure that we were still doing our sort of monthly reporting in year. We were still trying to keep going with the draft annual accounts every year. But probably the biggest challenge is having almost 2 to 3 years sets of accounts live at the same time during those early 15 months I was here. You've got to remember then any change in the previous year had a change on the current year. So managing all of that and juggling that, those consequent impacts year on year was a really, really tough technical challenge, as well as being able to deploy the staff either on the retrospective restatement exercise or the here and now sort of thing. So that was a big challenge from an organizational perspective, just to get people doing the right jobs. There's the whole thing about managing internal and external stakeholders. We had an audit committee that was obviously and board that was very interested in improving our financial reporting. We had NHSI there as a regulator, but also there as an intense support team to work with us. We had Deloitte. So there was as well as that, obviously maintain and manage an external audit relationship, which by this point had become quite fractious and challenged, inevitably, because of what had happened. And there was a real credibility thing to re-establish with our auditors in terms of, we've got this under control. It's going to take a while to sort it out, but we've now got the right structure and the people in place to make sure that we improve our reporting. So managing all of those stakeholders, some of which the relationship has been quite challenging, was really difficult, but ultimately very rewarding. I think personally as well, I was having to do a lot of manage the whole process, but then I was getting stuck into the weeds, as they say. So one example was I had to recreate 10 years of the revaluation reserve. So for those of you who are more technical, that you realize what that is. But literally, I had to go back 10 years because it was in such a state that we then had to, build up year by year by year. And I remember that's what I spent my first Easter holiday doing, just going back to basics, going back 10 years and going through that process. And that was just one example. We had situations where we didn't have a fixed asset register. The fixed asset register was actually on a spreadsheet, which is quite hard to believe, but there was just some fundamentals you'd expect to be in place that weren't, and we had to almost do that first before we then could do some of the more developmental stuff to get us back in the pack, if you like. I've said before, resilience was massive. I think you almost had to accept it was a 2 to 3 year burn. Couldn't do this, so I'll put here, Rome wasn't built in a day. It isn't. And we have to accept that. There was almost a stage process of what's our priorities, and then we'll move on to priority 2 and then priority 3, which is probably why the existence testing of assets moved further down the list. But effectively, be resilient. Every day is different. Some days were bad, some days were better. You just wipe yourself down and start again, really. So again, personal resilience and the team was really, really important. And I'd say, I said at the start, the commitment from the team right through was fantastic, really, to stick with it. I guess probably just basic point, we had daily cadence, not just internally, but externally with our auditors as well. So we were effectively at least 2 or 3 meetings, not only internally, but then two meetings every week with our auditors, just to make sure we were progressing and addressing the audit queries that we needed to address. So yeah, I guess that slide's a bit of a snapshot of some of the challenges and some of the solutions, I guess, that we look to try and do to get us into this position. I think, yeah, I'm just going to pause there if there's any questions before on that particular bit, and then I'll hand over to Donna if that's okay. Can't see any hands, so Donna, did you want to do your bit, and then we can perhaps mop up any questions at the end?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Simon. So I'm Donna Briggs. I'm another Deputy Director of Finance at University Hospitals of Leicester, but my portfolio, Simon's was financial services, mine is staff development. So as well as the headlines that Simon shared around sort of the financial misstatements, there were also headlines in the local newspapers and in journals as well around staff feeling unable to whistleblow, and that was a factor in enabling all of the things that Simon has talked about in terms of the intentional misstatement of the financial position at UHL. So a really tough time reputationally for the staff that were working in the finance department at UHL. So if you can move on, Simon, in terms of slide.
Yeah.
So I joined just after Simon in April 21, and I think as Simon had mentioned, the first thing I did when I came into post, I was only interim initially, was to look at the structure of the department. It was massively under-resourced. Not only was it not fit for purpose, it was far too small, and actually there were a lot of vacancies in there as well. So we had, a handful of really hard-working staff trying to cover lots of different roles. So I led a management change program, and we restructured it. We put a significant investment into all of the finance teams in financial services and in financial management, and in all areas, to make sure that going forward we had enough resources in place. And then sort of hand in hand with that, the work that I did was around just understanding where staff were at. So they've been through this really, really difficult journey. How were they feeling now? How did they feel 18 months ago when it was all exploding in the newspapers? How do they feel now? And most importantly, what do they want it to feel like going forward? So what are the things that they want management to focus on now to make this an environment that they want to work in and they want to stay working in? So gathering that feedback, that went into sort of a bigger action plan, and we used an existing forum of our finance and procurement skills development working group to make 4 kind of work streams there. One focused around culture and behaviours, one focused around communication, another on training and development, and then the final one on integration, because they were the themes that came out of all of the feedback that staff said they wanted us to focus on. So some of the things we started to put in place initially, around communication, monthly director engagement events were set up immediately, where the CFO just talks to all of the staff just once a month, but that was more than they'd had for years potentially. So, you know, sharing where we are, what's going on, and trying to sort of encourage that two-way communication with all of the staff, with the senior team. Finance were also saying they felt a bit lost in terms of where they were in the wider trust. So we engaged with them to develop their own strapline to make them feel part of the wider organisation, which is adding value to everything UHL does. So that's a strapline that we still use. We also got external consultancy in to work with the CFO and the deputies around how we were going to lead the teams, because it was very difficult for the CFO and senior leadership team as well. But they needed to be in a place where they could lead by example and really bring the staff along on the improvement journey. And we also started some work system-wide around working outside of UHL with partner organisations of the ICB and LPT. And also did some work around new starters, because that was, you know, about how we get people to feel part of the team and understand how we all fit together and what their role is in part of the bigger, wider picture. So that was sort of in the first year. And as I say, a lot of the focus was on that MOC and gathering the feedback. So in the second year, 22-23, really started to do some significant pieces of work. So I won't go through all of these, but you know, we set up some monthly nomination awards because staff were saying they didn't feel recognised, they didn't feel valued. So this was for staff to call out other staff members or teams, so whether it's an individual or more of a team effort, and it could be something technical that they've done really well, or just some support that they've provided each other. And that's something, I think, since we set that up, we've had over 600 nominations, and that continues to be a strong topic on each of our monthly engagement events that we have now. Staff also fed back that the appraisal, you know, that their kind of support, their development wasn't in existence. I think appraisal rate was something like 28% completion when I first started. So we did a lot of work on making the paperwork relevant to what finance staff might need, creating a training needs analysis, training policy to support that. A library of videos around how to do different things on the financial systems, and also monthly development training sessions that will be specific to things like, I think this month's was year end. So obviously that's very topical. We've done them on creating business cases. We've also done them on more management style things like sickness training, you know, sickness absence. So put a lot of things in place to try and get staff feeling supported, that they could start to create some clear objectives, and particularly that their personal development plan was in place with access to things that would help them improve and grow in their roles. Another thing, because we'd obviously come back from COVID, because all this was happening when COVID was on, coming back into the office after COVID was a bit hit and miss. People didn't really know where they should be based, how often they should come in, what were other teams doing. So we did quite a big piece of engagement with staff around what would work for them. And then with service managers about what are the service needs that we need to meet, and sort of putting those two together and coming up with a document that I think is still working well. It's not perfect, and none of this is perfect, but sort of gave a bit of a framework for people to understand when they were coming in, why they were coming in, what other teams were coming in at the same time, so that we could sort of make their work as efficient as we possibly could. Another thing we set up was a monthly mental health and wellbeing cafes. We knew that some staff were struggling with their mental health and were sort of reaching out for support. So that's something that's still in existence now. It happens every month. It's very well attended. It's a really open forum where everything stays in that virtual room. Nothing comes outside of that room, but staff can talk about how they're feeling. We normally sort of put some topics in there to give it a bit of focus, but just help support each other around any issues that we might be having around our mental and physical health. We did a lot of training for teams. So I think there were 26 teams that underwent DISC training around how do you work, how do you operate, where's your sort of natural area, and more importantly, where are the members of your team sitting in that, so that they could better understand how to work together as a team. And we did lots of other things. I won't go through all of these. I suppose some of the key things, we did an annual budget holder survey, which was the first one we'd done of those. And that was really important to understand how the services felt we were delivering and what they wanted to see more of, less of, what they wanted to see us improving. And on the back of that survey, created an action plan. And we also set up a best practice group for band 6 and band 7. And you'll see on another slide, we then expanded that to the lower bands in the following year, just around sharing best practice, trying to do things once, trying to do things the most efficiently, and trying to just encourage that whole working together and sharing. So that's probably the key bits that I want to pick out of that slide. Thanks, Simon.
No worries. Sorry, it's stuck. Got the next one?
No, I think it's stopped sharing, Simon.
Oh, is it? Sorry.
It's all right.
We have problems there.
This is why I didn't want to share the slides. So I gave it to you.
I'll put it on slideshow, but if not, I'll go back.
Yeah, that's great.
Is that visible? Yeah.
Yeah. So after 2 years of doing that whole restructure, getting the feedback, trying to put some action plans in place, trying to set some things up, we started to feel like there was a little bit of external recognition for some of this hard work, which is really important. So we were approved as an employer by AAT, CIMA, ACCA and CIPFA, which we hadn't had that previously. We got our level 1 accreditation with One NHS Finance. We won an internship award, and we had a couple of our innovations published on the One NHS Finance website around those directorate awards that I was talking about, and our mental health and wellbeing cafe. So that felt really good. So some of that hard work was starting to pay off. We were starting to turn that reputation around a bit from those headlines that we saw to being a directorate that was starting to deliver and, create confidence in other organisations. So moving on. So then 23, 24.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. That's when some more meatier things were set up as well. So we set up a staff consultative forum, which was for band 7s and below, and it was an opportunity for staff to come together in a confidential environment to discuss things that they weren't happy with, things that, on the ground they wanted to see changed. And that anonymous feedback via me went through to the senior management team so they could discuss how staff were feeling and what actions they could put in place to address that. So that was quite a successful forum that's still ongoing. Another key thing that we put in place, given that we got this new structure, we still felt like sometimes that career journey was quite difficult, and we want to retain our staff wherever possible and develop our own talent. So we put in place development roles where, for example, you might have a band 6 role, you advertise it, but advertise it as a band 6 development role, and it's sort of got a matrix attached to the JD. So you deliver your band 6 role, you get paid at a band 6, but in the meantime, you're trying to tick off everything on this matrix. And when you've delivered all of that, you automatically progress into the band 7 role. And we've introduced those from band 2 development roles right up to band 8A development roles. And they've been successful, and people are progressing, and we are retaining our talent. So that's worked really well for us. Another thing we put in place was a behaviours charter to make sure. So the staff created this. This wasn't management led. This was about staff saying these are the behaviours that we want to see and we don't want to see. And almost all of the directorate have physically signed up to this charter to say, I agree to adhere to these behaviours. And more importantly, I agree to either be called out or call it out if I see those behaviours happening where they're not appropriate. And similarly, a sort of email etiquette document as well about how we, should and shouldn't be sending emails, which can, as I'm sure people know, can cause issues. So we created that. We also created a training program, which happens every other month, where there's a whole day for clinicians and budget holders where we go through things like business cases, costing, budget holder reports, CIP. There's about 8 different sections to it. That's working really well. So we're trying to sort of share that financial knowledge so that budget holders do feel well equipped to be able to do their job properly and to be able to challenge on finances. As I said, we set up the best practice group in that year for the lower bands. We started hosting graduate trainees, which we hadn't done for years. We've got some finance apprentices in place now, and also trying to get coaches in place. So we've got a couple of staff members who are undergoing an apprenticeship at the moment to be a qualified coach. And encouraging mentoring, particularly via One NHS Finance and the HFMA scheme, so that staff have got support from a coaching or a mentoring perspective. So recognition by then, at the end of 23-24, we got our level 2 accreditation. We had the final professional accounting body give us training employer status. We got another innovation published around our FPSD working group, talking about those work streams. We won East Midlands HFMA Finance Team of the Year. We won Team Player at Value Maker Conference. We were doing showcase sessions. So you can see we were really starting to build in confidence, put ourselves forward and actually winning awards for either individuals or for teams for some of the stuff that we've been doing. And I think that's really helped staff when you think about how they would have felt when they were seeing those headlines about their organisation and their finance department back in sort of 2020, to being externally recognised by HFMA and organisations like that. I think that's really helped staff build the confidence and realise, you know, they are doing a fantastic job. It's just that was a really difficult time, and we have come through it. So if we can move on, Simon.
Yeah.
And then the last slide is just sort of what we're doing, or penultimate, is what we're kind of doing in this year just gone. So with the talent management scheme that's now in place, we've changed our appraisal documentation so that that's very much a part of that, and a real focus around what people want to do in terms of their career progression. We've updated our training policy again because we're having a real push now on apprenticeship levy funded training. As I'm sure your organisations are, you know, it's really difficult now to find the funds, but we want to encourage people to study. So we're very much pushing that down the apprenticeship levy route where we can now. We've delivered a couple of finance away days for the system now. So finance colleagues in UHL, in LPT and in the ICB have got together June last year. And actually, I think the February one was this Monday or last Monday. Really successful days, helping networking, helping us to work better across the system and work more as one. We've got a real focus at the moment on developing a directorate intranet site. That's both for us as a directorate, so that there's sort of one place where we've got one version of everything stored, but also a sort of more outward facing intranet site where the rest of the trust can access finance information. We are literally in the process of accreditation for level 3 at the moment. So I'm hoping next time we do a presentation like this, I'll be able to put it on the delivered slide, but we'll see. But we have put ourselves forward because we believe that we have really progressed in terms of what we've delivered today, and we're worthy of at least putting in an application for it. And a key focus for me at the moment, I think it's embargoed till the 10th of March, is to look at our NHS staff survey results for our directorate, because all of this stuff that we've done sounds great, but you know, we're nowhere near what we need, where we need to be. We've definitely moved forward from where we were, undoubtedly, but there's so much still to do. And I think that staff survey will be a really rich area to gain some of the insight into what are the things that staff still really want us to focus on. And we'll be sharing that at the engagement event next month with staff, and getting the various deputy directors of finance and senior management teams to start leading their own action plans around that. So the next slide, just in terms of in this year, the external recognition that we've achieved. So again, a couple of innovations published on One NHS Finance. We've had staff shortlisted for Leader of the Year. We won the Working as One award as the three systems in the LLR group. We also won UHL1 Student of the Year. We got gold partner status with ACCA. And of course, the absolute tough of the shop, as you've heard. You could probably understand why, given Simon's presentation earlier on. Simon actually won the National HFMA Outstanding Contribution Award for all of the stuff that he spoke about in terms of that journey that we went on from an accounts and an improvement position. So that's the end of mine. I think literally the last slide is just about questions, comments, which can be for me or for Simon. And Simon, I think you got some rounds of applause there for your award. So
Sorry.
that was great.
Thank you. Can't see the screen, so I'll unshare now. Is it unshared now?
Yeah, it's unshared now.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
So any questions, any comments from anyone? Oh, Mark.
Hi, yes, thank you for that. I appreciate everything that you shared with us. I suppose, given the starting point, there was a lot of good ideas in there and a lot of sort of common sense ideas in there. There was a mix of both, really. But I suppose, like anybody, if we win the lottery tomorrow, I won't be turning up for work on Monday. And that's obviously people, sort of work to live. So, and in any culture, it's about people working together. But given the starting point, how easy was it to get everybody on board on the journey through? Because I could imagine it's quite a low place. Not only did you have all the financial issues, but it was peak COVID, and with everything that's going on in everybody's life, I suppose it's just kind of how did you manage to get so many of the staff on the journey to go from sort of where you were 5 years ago to now, and how engaging were people to sort of when you start throwing out ideas such as the stuff you've presented out, how on board were people from the start? Or did that take a bit of work to encourage people to sort of believe in us and you can go on the journey sort of thing?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, Mark, I mean, we didn't start from a position of trust. There wasn't an automatic trust there. And I mean, certainly from my perspective, I came in and my first job card was to undertake a management of change process. So I wasn't the most popular individual initially. I think it was about openness and transparency. They were the key things that many staff talked about not being in existence. And so it was really, I didn't come in expecting to start from a position of being trusted. I came in expecting to demonstrate why people should be able to trust me and the rest of the members of the senior management team. And that's about consistency as well. If we say we're going to do something, we then do it. And it's that listening, because any one of us can come in and say, oh, I think we need to do X, Y, and Z, and that'll make this place better. But it's about asking staff, what do you want? What can we do for you? And then delivering on it. And, as I said before, it's still a journey. You get those initial champions, and they're the ones that you have to really work with, because they're the ones that say, do you know what, I'm already in, and what can I do to help? Because all of those things, whether it's the health and wellbeing cafe, whether it's the finance and procurement skills development working group, they're all manned by volunteers. The behaviours champions, they're all volunteers. So it's about getting those people to come forward, because I think it's easier for staff to then see, one of their peers, one of their colleagues or line manager or someone that reports to them is starting to take action on this. And it's sort of generated it in that way, I think. But it was slow and it was tough. And are 100% of our 210 directorate staff behind all this? No, but the majority are, and we just have to keep working at that and keep proving why everyone else still needs to come on board. I don't know if I've waffled there, Mark. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Donna. Let's see, Simon's got his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add that. I mean, I think there's an acceptance when we came in. There had been underinvestment in the finance team as well, so it almost team had been asked to do more than they had the capacity to deal with. I think that you have to go in with an open mind, as Donna said. There was a no judgment sort of perspective from mine. I mean, it's a bit cliched, isn't it? I mentioned about compassionate leadership, but treating everybody as an adult and actually understanding what they've been through, and say not judging what had happened in the past. And there was, as I said in my bit, there was an actually acceptance things needed to improve, because we were where we were sorry, we were where we were, and those things needed to improve. So I think, you know, as long as people understood that and you took them with you, then that was part of the process, really. But there was some attrition. Some, you know, I was relying on incumbent members of staff to help deliver the job for me, which was really challenging. And there was some attrition. Some people did leave, but, you know, some people are still with us that have been on the journey and probably got really positive experience out of it. Ultimately, I think just at the time, it was obviously a difficult place to be. But our main thing was to take everybody with us, and I say, no, not judging anyway, because in some ways they'd been working with very limited capacity to be able to do what was being asked of them to do. So yeah, it was, I guess, probably just add that bit, really.
And I think just the final bit, Mark, was the CFO that came in, the substantive CFO, was totally behind this, and that made a real difference and was extremely visible. I mean, literally was out and about. Every member of staff knew who they were. They were talking to everyone. They were listening. They were bringing back actions to the deputies to say, I've heard this on the ground. This needs to change. And I think that's really important, that it goes right the way to the top, and it's really strong leadership from CFO.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. And I think that's probably the biggest point, because execs in a lot of organisations not necessarily always seen by staff. So I think that's quite a key part as well.
Yeah, definitely. Any other questions or comments? You've just stunned them into, thank God I wasn't working at UHL.
Well, if there are no more questions or comments, just a big thank you to both Simon and Donna for a brilliant session, and hope everyone enjoyed it. And if you do have any questions after, happy for you to email in and I can pass them on to Donna and Simon if you're happy for me to do so.
Yeah, definitely.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Brilliant.
Hope you
Thanks,
enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Really
Thanks.
good
Bye.
story.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.